Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the moon, and we're using several pictures, some from the Worldwide Telescope, others from the NASA JPL photo journal. But the pictures that we're looking at from the Worldwide Telescope today are not the craters that we've been looking at in the North and the South Pole. This time we're looking at the surface. There's some surface areas here. And I'm mostly interested in getting through that doggone obfuscation that they've put on the surface that's so difficult to get through. I was able to do that though, and bear with me as we go. Some of these pictures, it's always back to that. It seemed too much, too incredible, too intense, whatever the case may be. But it all comes full circle, and it may look in the beginning here at these pictures from the Worldwide Telescope, since they don't come out, perfectly clear or sharp. You might tend to think that it's baloney or just wallpaper or something. But one thing I can tell you that's true with all the pictures, if you want to look, I'm not going out of my way to show it to you, but in every single picture, whether it's this picture here from the Worldwide Telescope of that obfuscated areas, or pictures from other places, in every case we have shadows. Shadows really are probably the #1 telling feature that we're going to have. But anyway, these areas here that are on the surface from the Worldwide Telescope, it really doesn't seem to matter where exactly I'm going to go to find these pictures. I have a couple of places that I use that were mostly random, but it's pretty much so far, every time I find a place where I think I can get through that obfuscation, I get these pictures. So what these pictures are telling me is that this kind of construction so far, on every picture I've looked at from the Worldwide Telescope, is like this. And this is very similar to everything we've talked about in the past. The population density is unimaginable, and these pictures really show that. And now when we move on to other kinds of pictures, you'll see essentially the same thing. So it is really unbelievable. I'll never stop saying that, because frankly, when I go through these pictures and as I try to clear them up, even as I get a picture cleared up and I think, well, that's just so great, I still doubt myself. I just find it so hard to believe that these things are actually there, and the quantity of them being there, and the fact that we can't see it from Earth. It's just so unbelievable. But as I always come back to it, every time, as unbelievable as it is, there are these pictures. And I know there's people out there that are saying, well, you can do anything you want these days, And while I know that to be true, personally, I am such an amateur that there's just no way that I could make this kind of thing up. But then that's just exactly what you'd expect somebody to say if they were accused of that. But the thing is, the helpful thing is with this video is the fact that we're going to see different kinds of pictures from different places, essentially all showing the same thing. Now, some of these pictures that we're looking at we've seen before, but I've enhanced them better. So in other words, we may have seen him before, but we haven't seen these pictures like this before. And so and some of the pictures are just unenhanceable, kind of like this one here. I've tried it so many different ways to show it more clearly or to make it more understandable. But you know, sometimes that's all we have. But I will say, though, that when we get a little closer in this picture, and I have one picture really close up, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It transforms the idea of this being just sort of a messy, white-looking, you know, unintelligible or hard to figure out what's going on picture, to actually being able to understand what it is we're looking at. And for those people that don't know, all of these pictures are satellite pictures, and you know, and so that's what we're looking at. So now this picture is way huge, obviously ridiculously large. What I'm pointing out here is you have white structures with shade on the sides of the buildings. Okay, that's what we have. And when you see this picture like this, and it's got all these white areas with connected to black connecting to them, so the shade part connected, it makes it hard to understand really when you're looking at it exactly what it is, you know, you're looking at. But now that you know that these dark areas that we see here, it's all shade. So if you were to think that this was not a real picture, the shade that you see on the sides of all these buildings hopefully will be enough to, you know, for you to say, hey, you know, this isn't made up, right? I mean, I think really ultimately shade is the number one thing that we can use to help us decide, you know, if something is real. I mean, there are other things that have been put out about civilization, things like the location, the structural geometry, the context, where it's at, how things are laid out next to each other, and that kind of thing. And some of the craters that we're looking at in this picture right here, the crater on the left side over here is actually Tycho crater. Tycho crater is the one that has the two bands of what is supposed to be regolith that stretch out in the distance. But what we have here with these lines that I drew in are each crater is surrounded by white buildings, and one side will show the dark shadow on the side of the building, and then by the time you switch over to the other side of the crater, it's all bright. So one side is dark thanks to shade, and the other side is all bright thanks to the sunlight hitting it there. So you know, once again, shade is telling us that this is actually here, regardless of how clear it is or that kind of thing. We definitely know that it's there. And if you take a close look at the centers of these craters, you'll very quickly be able to tell it's not a real crater. And which reminds me is, you know, none of the craters are real. I mean, that I've been able to find. I remember back in the day, Bruce Seazall talking about craters that looked, you know, like not real, like they were made up. And I think he kind of got away from that because it was so hard to believe. Even back then, you know, this is what he was seeing, but it's so hard to believe that all of these craters could be made up, you know, false craters. Just part of the illusion to keep us fooled. And when it comes to the moon, it is the most important celestial body that they want to keep secret. I mean, it is by far more important than any other place just because of the proximity to Earth. It's just too close to us, and it would just freak people out to know that there's a population on the moon probably, you know, I don't know, you know, 10 times higher than what we have on Earth. I have no doubt of that. Just based on the population density and the fact that it covers the surface as far as we can tell. And let's not forget, and this is only, you know, best guess, but I'm pretty sure that the center of the moon is hollow as well. This has been brought up so many times in the past, I'm not going to go into it at all. But essentially what we have with the moon is a giant spaceship. And you know, it's a big spaceship, right? I guess, you know, but if you've been looking at pictures of this kind of genre for long enough, you may have seen other spacecraft much larger than the moon. The one that comes to my mind in particular is the very large sphere that was on the sun, or right up next to the sun, with a vortex of plasma coming up from the surface to that giant sphere, which eventually pulled away and took off. Okay, have you ever seen that video? And that sphere was probably 100 times larger than Earth, if not more. It was truly massive. So when you get into these civilizations, they can do whatever the hell they want. They've got all the technology and all of the knowledge. And the thing is, we've seen other pictures, and I'm going to start going back into some of the stuff I've done before and redo it, because I can make it look so much clearer now. But I think of places like Venus. I always bring up Venus. It's a giant city. It's just a city covering the entire planet. And apparently the same is true with the moon. We've looked at some other places like Dione or Ganymede or Titan, a couple others where it appears the same type of thing. And if you have a place like Venus that's covered with population, then why the hell not every place else in the solar system, including you know, comets and large asteroids and that kind of thing. And once again, you know, I just have to say that, you know, the Webb telescope is an amazing, beautiful thing. I got to get back to that. So here is Tycho crater, and there's three or four buildings there that show at the top of the buildings either windows or openings. I've seen this in other pictures. There's this picture, and I'm going to show you another picture coming up here. But you know, whenever you have different pictures that verify the same thing, that really, you know, that really nails it. You know, it can't be considered image artifacts or something like that. And while this picture is less clear than the one we just looked at when it comes to those structures, it does show the same thing. They're a little hard to see in this picture, I know, but it is there. And so once again, we have these three, maybe four buildings with these openings at the top in two different pictures. So absolutely, it's there. There's no question about it. And as far as these pictures are concerned, if anybody wants to know where they came from, if they want links, that kind of thing, let me know. I'll be happy to send them to you. Until then, I'm not going to bother putting up all that information, because if nobody's using it, then, you know, why put it up? I've been saying this for a long time, and very few people have asked me for links to these images. So once again, here we have buildings wrapping around the surface of the moon, coming down from the top at an angle. Buildings by the many thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, I imagine, covering the entire moon. And so this is why I've been saying there's no way that we're going to go to the moon. I don't believe that we have. There are people, relatives in my family or my wife's family, who actually worked at NASA as an engineer during the landings. And boy, he would beg to differ. I'm not even going to bring this up with him, and I don't blame him. And a lot of people say, well, there's evidence afterwards. I'll get back to that. Here's a what I called an iconic picture. This is something we've seen many times, and I've done a couple of videos on this area. It's very difficult, very difficult to do. And I just brought us a couple of pictures out of here, a couple of pretty good pictures that that show what we're talking about. But getting back to this relative who was an engineer at NASA, you know, the first thing he'll say is, well, look, we have satellite pictures of the rover tracks running all over the place from every single mission that landed on the moon. And while they may have those kinds of pictures, those would have to be the very easiest kind of pictures of all to falsify, you know, to fake. You know, just get a sandy looking area and draw some lines on it with a little bit of you know, a little bit of image manipulation. Now you have tracks running around on the moon. You know, it's kind of like this dumbass picture that they sent, they put up on the news, that showed where that Japanese rover landed and where it crashed. So they have a huge picture of the moon and a little tiny circle down there. You can't even see in the inside of the circle that this is where it crashed. Okay, really? I mean, what good is a picture like that, where you can see absolutely nothing, but there's a blue dot down on the surface? What is the point of showing us a picture like that? I would like to know. That is completely ridiculous. Anybody could have grabbed a picture of the moon and put a blue dot on it and said, there's where the crash was. Here we are back at Tycho crater, and you can see these white lines coming out. This originally came from a color picture, and I don't know how true this color is supposed to be. I've never really looked into that much, but it didn't matter too much because I always take it to the black and white. Color is just another tool that NASA uses to obfuscate things. But you can very clearly see these long lines that stretch out from Tycho are lines of buildings, one structure after another all the way down. And in the middle of those lines and all around the outside, so in this area where this is supposed to be an impact crater, everything that you see will be buildings just going in all directions, usually going up and away from the center of what was supposed to be an impact. And again, off to the right, you see these buildings coming around the edge of the moon. So, yep, those are you know, pretty clear pictures. And every single time, like right here, dead center at the bottom, you see a crater. It's a crater within a crater. They're never craters. They never look like craters. They're always the same. They're built up with white buildings around the edges. That's to signify the, you know, the circle from the impact. And then whatever else, depending on what kind of crater it's supposed to be. It might have regolith spread out around that would be light in color. In this case, it would be light buildings instead. But any of this stuff that you look at here, any of these craters, when you look at them from a distance, they look like craters. And you look at them close up and they don't look anything like craters. So here's buildings going up on the right and the back. And if you want to take the time and look in particular for taller structures, and you'll see the shadows on one side. You know, if it weren't for the shadows, I don't know what you could call this necessarily. The shadows to me really nail it down hard that this is actually here. Because an image artifact will not have a shadow. Now here's a picture. This is another seemingly innocent picture. This is one that I got. I think I just got this off the internet. I'm not sure about that. But from Flickr, something like that. But it is just sort of a typical look of the moon. We're going to be looking just in a certain area in this picture. And then this one little area, you see it up the top left there is a big circle, a dark circle that's supposed to be a crater. And quite a few other craters all around, all artificial. Again, from a distance, they look perfectly natural and perfectly real. This also is a difficult picture to bring out to you guys, so you're going to see it in some different ways. You know, some ways you'll see certain things, other ways you'll see other things. But each one of these little craters here all have buildings in the middle of them. Pretty good sized buildings too. Now I know that when you have a crater, impact crater, it has a little mound in the middle it's supposed to. These are much larger than those little mounds that they're supposed to have in the middle. These are come up out of the crater. So a real crater might have a little mound in the middle of it. I forget what they call it. But these craters all have much larger structures coming out of the center. All the way from the top right is another crater right there. See that? It's a group of them in that area. There you go. And that one there in the middle, the right of center, it's got tall buildings. So it's a crater from a distance, but those buildings going around the edges are tall, not short. As long as they have a white roof, that will signify the edge of the crater. But if you compare that one to the others, you can see it has very tall buildings going around the outside, whereas the other ones are very short buildings. And here's a picture. It's the same area, a little different angle. And I've got a pretty good shot right there, dead center of a good sized structure there. Also, you can see the buildings go around the outside of it. This signifies it as a crater, but look how big that building is coming out of the middle of it. So a person could say, yeah, this is fake, and you know, it's a lot easier to believe that than it is to try and wrap your mind around what it is I'm actually showing. Like I said, man, I second guess myself all the time, but I have to forge ahead because I know what I'm seeing, and by the time I vet it out, I tell myself, okay, this is the real deal. But it's still so hard to believe. So somebody who's never looked at this kind of thing or done this kind of work, it would just be way too much. So I understand it, but I just want everyone to know that I'm doing the best I can to show you the real deal. And if the real deal makes your mind blow up, I'm sorry for that. I understand it. Bear with me and just try to keep an open mind, because I'm not the only one that has pictures like this. And you know, Technothanks is gone now, but he had some great stuff here, as well as Joseph P. Skipper. Got to go see those guys, or Joseph P. Skipper anyway. You got to go see Joseph P. Skipper. I'll put a link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone.